welcome to Chapter 2. So in Chapter 2, we're going to really examine, the title is Understanding the A+ Training CompTIA Exam from that lens. So what do I mean by that? I want to get into some of the prerequisites again that I kind of talked about before. You want to be familiar with different parts of a personal computer: motherboard, CPUs, power supply, memory modules, and storage devices. That's why you can't necessarily come in my opinion, and just study this material cold you to pass the exam. I mean, everyone learns differently. So again, I'm hoping the videos will help you ramp you up to speed a little bit quicker. Your hands-on, getting your own laptop, desktop, taking that apart, understanding, touching the components will help. The awareness of the CompTIA certification exam and the objectives. So again, that's what you need to be very familiar with, particularly those related to hardware installations and configurations. Your ability to interpret specifications and performance indicators to make informed decisions. That's very important about components compatibility and the performance itself. So again, about the component compatibility and performance. The ability to resolve compatibility issues between various hardware components is very important. And be familiar with troubleshooting common issues related to hardware installation and configuration. Again, these are prerequisites when you are attempting to sit for this exam. So just kind of go over a couple of things, the exam objectives. I want to talk about exam format and some study tips for success. So the A+ Training CompTIA exam is made up of two core components. The core one focuses on hardware, network, mobile devices, and troubleshooting hardware issues. The second one covers operating systems, security, software troubleshooting, and operational procedures. Both exams consist of a multiple choice question. Some of them are drop and drag and performance-based simulation. Each exam is timed with a duration of 90 minutes. So let me say something about this exam. I found this one of the hardest exams to take. That and the Network Plus. The Security Plus I didn't find as challenging, but the Network Plus and the A Plus are truly, I would say, one of the hardest. It just requires you to really know your stuff. Again, that's just me. I had to really understand the CPU. I needed to understand how everything connects. I need to understand how to troubleshoot things. So I had to really study. Again, there's some exams you have to study for. Some you could maybe just understand definitions and there's multiple choice guess. But you see where it says drop and drag simulations, and it's pretty real. You got to know where you're dropping and dragging things to. So it's not so much of a guess game. Just my two cents on it. But we hope to cover some of the strategies here so you could be relatively successful. So let's talk about the exam objectives. So the key exam objectives is really to succeed in the A+ Training CompTIA certification exam. You must master several key areas. These include understanding the fundamentals of computer hardware, software such as processes, memory, storage, device, peripherals. I always mess that up. Proficiency in network concepts, including LANs, WANs, network security is also crucial. Again, additionally, knowledge of mobile devices, virtualization technology, and the ability to configure and troubleshoot these systems is really essential from that perspective. All right, let's think about and talk about the core exam. Let's break these out into two components. Understanding the power requirements. So the power requirements of all components and the maximum power output are really crucial in managing new builds, upgrades, and repairs. Proper understanding ensures that the components receive adequate power, preventing damage and ensuring optimal performance. So again, really understand that. I have here managing heat, which you might say, well, what do you mean managing heat? One of the things when I used to build systems and sell them, one of the things I didn't always do well was manage heat, because I had to learn pretty much the hard way that I have to install and maintain the cooling system, which is going to be essential for reliable computing environment. Overheating can cause damage to the components and reduce performance levels. So just again, keep that in mind from that perspective. Core exam objectives 2. Provisioning power supply PSUs. So when provisioning the PSUs, it's important to check that the input voltage and wattage rating requirements are within line with what you're trying to build out, data center, etc. Consider using what we call a module connector to reduce cable clutter and ensure efficient power distribution. Again, the videos kind of cover what I mean by that. In cooling system maintenance, you want to ensure that the passive fan based, it's either passive fan based or liquid based cooling system. So again, you might have a fan, but also you might have a liquid that's actually making things happen to cool things. And really determine, is it sufficient enough to keep the computer and the operating with an acceptable temperature. Now, you're going to have ranges that are critical for that, mostly in your data center type of setup. If you're buying a laptop and desktop, a lot of these things are covered for you inherently. Regular maintenance, such as keeping the computer really free of dust, and applying thermal paste correctly and optimizing heat transfer. We're going to get into some of that a little bit later, because again, this is really about building out that system. So let's look at the exam format and let's get into some components of that. So the exam format and the scoring piece. So the A+ training CompTIA exam is a comprehensive assessment, again, designed to evaluate the knowledge and the skills you, the IT professional. The core exam covers topics, again, as I said before, hardware networking, while the second piece of the exam addresses operating systems and security. Now, to pass, you must score at least 675 out of 900 on the Core 1 exam and 700 out of 900 on the Core 2 exam. The exam, again, as I mentioned before, includes performance-based simulations to test real-world troubleshooting and configuration skills. So again, just to say more about that, when I was taking the exam, I had the multiple choice, but then I had to drop and drag scenarios and really ensure I knew what I was talking about to pass on the first go round, which I did. So let's talk about study tips for success. I think this is very important, and sometimes it's kind of overrated, underrated, but a real necessary skill to pick up so you will be effective as it relates to studying for the exam and then successfully passing. So the study tips for success, and again, I'm going to reiterate this in my videos, and if you reach out to me directly, I'll kind of even give you some more. So success in the A+ training CompTIA exam. So basically, you're taking the training, but really the success to the exam really requires preparation. You want to create a consistent study schedule. You want to utilize a variety of resources. This is just one of them. But you really want to work on is practice exams, and practice exams. That's what I use, and that's what helped me. Online tutorials and study groups does help and help support your learning. Understanding and retaining of the material. Everyone learns differently. So you want to make sure you're finding a method that's going to help you understand the material and retain it and be effective on the exam day. So that's just something you really want to understand. You want to actively engage with the content through, again, you want to take notes, you want to look at my videos, you want to get a laptop or a desktop and really get your hands dirty, really. So you really want to make sure you understand the concepts so you can reinforce that learning. You want to maintain a balanced approach by taking care of your physical and mental health. This is really something important. It's really essential to optimal performance. So when myself, I really got engrossed with the material. I was trying to study for the Security Plus, Network Plus, and A Plus at the same time, and I just drove myself really nuts and um, even got ill behind it because I really felt this was important and I needed to get it done. But again, I was not doing myself any service by just really taking on more than I should from that perspective. So as usual with all my chapters, I kind of wrap it up with a questionnaire. So let's look at chapter 2. Describe the structure of a Core 1 and Core 2 exam. As I have written here, the Core 1 exam covers hardware, networking, mobile devices, hardware troubleshooting. Core 2 exam covers operating system, security, software, troubleshooting as it relates to software, operational procedures. Both exams will include multiple choice questions, drop and drag questions, and performance-based simulation. I think I said enough on this already from my experience. So what type of hardware components are critical for the exam, crucial for the exam? You really want to understand the hardware as it relates to the motherboard, the processor, and what I mean by hardware, the components, the memory, storage device, the HDDs, SSDs, and peripherals along the way. So explain the importance of understanding the different operating systems. Understanding different operating systems is important because IT professionals need to install, configure, troubleshoot various OS such as Windows, Mac OS, and Linux to ensure compatibility and optimal performance of IT system. Now that's the textbook answer. I don't remember installing technically Linux or Mac operating systems for a while now. A lot of these systems kind of come built in. I do have to configure it for my organization. I remember doing that. So I think understanding the question is important. The reality of how much of this you may or may not do would be a factor because nowadays you can run an install that will just create your Windows-based configuration. Like I said, many systems come with Windows on it. Many come with a Mac operating system. You may have to do a Linux depending on what environment you're in. But again, really understanding the question and then the installation piece depends. So what are the key networking concepts covered in the exam? So again, key networking concepts include understanding the different types of LAN, WAN, so WAN and WLAN. So I guess you pronounce that WAN. I'm not sure, but you get my point. Network protocols and services, configuring and troubleshooting network connections, and basics of network security. So what are some effective study strategies for the A plus CompTIA exam? Effective strategies really include creating a study schedule. I agree with that. Utilize a various sources like official guides, online training, tutorial, courses like mine, practice exams, staying organized. I cannot stress this enough. Staying organized and actively engage in the material by taking notes and participating in study groups. Also, getting your hands dirty, getting a laptop, getting a desktop. Again, I tend to repeat over and over. Hopefully one of them will kind of sink in from that perspective. Okay, describe the steps to assess the CPU when replacing a faulty one. So again, you might just think logically. In order to get to something, you got to open the case. You want to take anti-static precautions. Again, the reason you're doing that is you could short out circuits if you haven't done that. You want to remove the cooling system. You want to release the CPU socket level and replace the CPU. Again, the question might be multiple choice. It says, what would you do first when assessing the steps for replacing a CPU? And they'll have several questions. If you see one of them says open the case, think logically, yes, of course I got to open it. But they may throw in some other answers to kind of fool you. But again, just remember logically, how would that work? Glossary of terms: CPU, central processing unit; RAM, random access memory; SSD, solid state drive; Over on the network terms, you have LAN, local area network, WAN, wide area network, and WAL, wireless local area network. Software terms, operating system, OS, BIOS, basic input and output of the system, GUI, graphical user interface. So these are these interface cards that you put to give you those graphics. It's actually a card that you put in a slot, and you'll see if you do gaming or anything else, a lot of folks will update the graphics cards pretty easily. Security exam terms, multi-factor authentication, simulation, performance-based exam questions, certification, official recognition of proficiency. As usual, not one and done. Please feel free to reach out for any any content I covered in the video, as well as content I covered in the PowerPoint. Thank you, and let's move on to Chapter 3, Lesson 3.